is to come in and take a look at some existing challenges. We know that the building shape of the Gerber building presents some unique challenges, and the current designs have really impacted the operational efficiencies, which kind of boils up and means that at the end of the day, the whole pro forma just isn't working for us in the way that we need it to do for Chicago market to be successful in this space. We've been asked to assemble a team of experts to review the project, bring some fresh perspectives, maybe some new ideas, strategize about some new approaches, and come back to you with a feasibility report and recommendations. We're doing this in an 8-week timeline, and we're not quite midway through that timeline yet, and the board is looking for a final report from us at the end of August. The team we pulled together, I'll just briefly introduce you to who's been working on this with us. Myself is Kay Kirsch. I'm with Firebrand Cooperative, and my role in this project is really the project manager, bringing the whole team together, keeping us organized, figuring out our plan and how we're going to get through this work this quickly, and just guiding the team through the steps that we need to go through. Jacqueline Hanna is with us. For those of you who know her, know that she is an absolute operational and financial feasibility expert. So she brings so much to our team, and we're incredibly grateful that she's able to join us tonight as well. Kevin O'Donnell, who currently works with Seven Roots and is also the operations manager at Hunger Mountain Food Co-op in Vermont, is our prepared foods deli programming expert. He also brings a great deal of operational expertise to our team. The rest of the team members include Carla and Kim from a company called Retail Planet. You have to love the little pun there. And they are our store design experts. Prior to starting Retail Planet, they worked in store design for a large corporate chain, and they brought all their years of expertise, set out on their own, and they've been doing this for about 30 years. They do it really, really well, and we're excited to work with them. They're also regional. They're based up in Wisconsin, so they're close enough that they know the Chicagoland area really well, and I think they'll be bringing some other efficiencies and some other pieces to the table with that as well. As with any project, we need the number crunchers, and Christina and Dawn are doing that for us. As we come up with ideas and scenarios, we'll be fleshing out what that looks like, and then these guys will be kind of our reality check, plugging our thoughts and ideas into the pro forma, you know, running the numbers, crunching it all, telling us if it works, telling us where we need to go back to the drawing board, and that's the work that Dawn and Christina are going to be doing for us. Another team member is Dan Arnett. He is a former GM at the Central Co-op in Seattle and also Sacramento Natural Foods in California. He's currently an IGM, and his unique expertise that we're counting on him to bring is his dense, urban, small format, high volume expertise in operations. For those of you who've dug into the details of the project, that is what Chicago market could be. Smaller format, but you have the potential, because you're in such a dense urban environment, to be very high volume. So he's bringing that to the table. And we have one other person helping us out, and that is Marcia Pfeiffer. She did your market study for you a couple of years ago, and we're checking in with her just to dig deeper to make sure we understand the assumptions she was using in those projections, and checking in with her on our ideas as we move forward through the project. This is the project plan. I know the board has seen this already, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just a gentle reminder that we are now in the middle part of week 4. We're about halfway through the project. We won't reach final conclusions until we get to the very end. And you'll notice that this green area here is about half of the 4 weeks where we're spending the majority of our time. And this is the sausage making. This is the phase where we're coming up with ideas, sharing them with the team, bouncing them around. If we think it's viable, figuring out how it fits in the store design, figuring out how the numbers work, processing that, looking at all that, and going through that cycle with all the different ideas and approaches that we come up with. So we're a week and a half into that. We've got another 2.5 weeks of that kind of creative, strategic test and try and, you know, test it again type of cycle. So that's where we are right now. We do not have any firm thumbs up, thumbs down conclusions to report. I will say I'm always optimistic, but in this case, I'm cautiously optimistic. You know, we're not going to be able to show you final floor plans and exact programming yet, but we do have a few tangible things we can share with you. But again, I caution you, we're early days. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. So please understand, you know, if we can't give you more answers than you might be hoping for, we're all gonna have to wait kind of till we get to the end of August and get through this whole process to bring you the information that you've asked us to investigate and research on your behalf. But there are a few tangible things we can share. And this is where I will hand it over to Jacqueline.
All right, thank you, Kay. Can you forward me to the next slide? Great. So first off, I want to review a little bit of what we've gotten done already. And Kay is lead on the team. I'm just the loudmouth. If you know me, I can talk. So I've been put in charge of doing the talking. Also, I have extensive general manager experience, so I have project managed projects like this numerous times before. So we have done a lot of research. One thing we came into this really thinking that hadn't been looked at is, in the case most food co-ops, there's a pretty similar best practices and standards. And we always say we're trying to avoid being the special snowflake because co-ops always think their community is, but generally most food co-ops really do fit into this, some very similar best practices and results. One area that is significant, back please, significantly different is actually urban markets, population dense urban markets, which is what you're in. So we did a lot of work to identify comparison co-op grocery stores. You are in the minority amongst food co-ops nationally to be in such an area of urban density. So we did a lot of research to find stores that deeply aligned on the type of density, the type of city, the type of community that's being served. So we had a more accurate base to work from. Some of the extrapolation that's been done previously has been done to generalized standards for food co-ops of around the same size throughout the country in a very different kind of market. So we've done that work. We've done in-depth on-site competition analysis. We came on site in the middle of this wonderful COVID wonderland, and Kay and I, and actually the design team as well, and we reviewed the site. We also, though, actually visited over a dozen competition stores. We did parking spot counts, you name it. We spent a great deal of time looking at what your competition's doing, their pricing, what's being offered, what's not being offered. And so that hands-on was just necessary to give you guys the depth of results that we're looking for. So we have already done, the team has a space use concept developed with better ingress, egress, and receiving solutions that's already in the refining stages. So this is an area where we can't quite show it to you quite yet, but I would say this piece is the furthest forward. We were able to make great leaps in this area quickly, and Kay will be sharing more on that. So programming concepts, this is a little harder to explain. There's different ways that the co-op could look at what it offers and what role it's trying to fill in the community that needs to be filled, that people want it to fill. Are we looking to be you know, the most price accessible option? Are we looking to be part conventional, part organic? Are we looking to be very organic, local focused? What kind of program are we going to be? The kind of store that people do a full grocery shop, or is this also going to be a real destination for quick, excellent food that you can grab and run? That's kind of what we mean by programmatic concepts. And there was a previous one that it was pretty in depth, and some parts of that there were questions if it was part of what was making feasibility not work. And so we have reviewed a whole bunch of different programming concepts as a team and narrowed it down to 2. We have a favorite at this point. We're not going to name it because we are not going to make you get all excited about and feel promised something yet. But we don't feel it's responsible to follow just one. So we have narrowed down to the top 2 programming concepts, and we're now in the process of vetting those and doing full analysis. And next slide. This is neat. So it was a very interesting time. We started with reviewing your market study, which is actually the base of any feasibility planning for any food co-op. It's the bedrock of all your financial planning, your program planning, everything. So we revisited that, and as your board knows, board members who are listening to me know, every time you've had that study revisited, your sales numbers have only gone up. It's a strong study. It's actually beyond strong. The Gerber Building location has a very high population density, that neighborhood, even for Chicago. It tests pretty off the charts. So when doing, and actually your market study analysis person not only tested the sites that you of course chose as a board, they do a meta study. They do a meta-analysis where they say, well, are there better sites? And they're looking at intersections, not like, oh, this building that already exists would be perfect. They're looking for intersections, sites, blocks that would just be perfect, would be a shoe-in fit for Chicago market to get the kind of sales it needs to attract the kind of audience that wants what it offers. And they did this meta-analysis. And something I want to make sure the board understands that's really interesting that was hiding inside of this study is that the meta-analysis showed they could not come up with a site that performed better than the Gerber Building anywhere in your trade area. Zero. So I want to make sure that's super clear to everyone because it was kind of hiding in there. What that means is that there literally isn't a site that is more ideal for not only to produce sales, but to meet the needs and desires of the community that surrounds it. So the site is excellent. The sales projections per square foot, which is we look at to see if you're going to be able to afford to run the store and pay the debt you're going to take on to open it, it is higher than 95% of all sales projections we've seen for startup food co-ops in the last decade. And I can say this if you don't know me, most of the board does, is because I work with Food Co-op Initiative and work with basically every startup food co-op in the nation for the last 5 years and my boss for the last 13. So we can say with absolute certainty that the sales projections for this site are almost unheard of for startup food co-ops. So something else that was hiding in there, and this one Kay found, and I want to give her credit for it because it did not occur to me. Some of their assumptions that they make when doing these market studies don't end up on paper. And so she dug in because she did a bunch of research, of course, on the walkability, bikeability of your community, found it was extremely high on the national scale, and asked our market study provider about that. And she said, yes, absolutely. Actually, the assumption is 75% of every sale that is made at the co-op will be made to someone who walked, biked, or used public transit. That is common for this level of extreme high density urban market, but very uncommon in the world of food co-ops. So it's an important piece to pull out, and then we decided we'll just go over the top and we'll count every parking space, as I said, of all your competition in the city, and we'll do parking ratios. We have their exact sales, and we did sales to parking space ratios. And your parking ratio at this building, while it would seem low for a food co-op in Central Illinois, where I am, in Champaign-Urbana, it is actually right on target in comparison to all of your major competition. And those are some of the unique pieces that we did not know before that we pulled out of this market study that are all, to be honest, very, very positive. There was nothing that we found out from this market study that lessened our sense of feasibility. Everything increased it.
Which is very exciting, actually. It's a lot of fun to get to that point. So the site and the building challenges, this is always the really fun part of doing a project, is figuring out how are we going to make this space work. We all know the Gerber Building is a triangle. Conventional wisdom says triangles don't work, but we didn't necessarily believe that. So we took a look at the floor plans. It was great to be on site and actually see the space. And the two big challenges that we heard about in advance were just receiving. How do we handle receiving, multiple semis, delivering stuff to the store, doing that in a safe and efficient way that's not going to drive our labor numbers through the roof. And so far that they hadn't found a solution, and we were seeing the impacts in the labor projections, which was bringing down the whole profitability of the entire project. And then the other question was customer ingress and egress. How do we get people in and out of the store in a way that checkouts are efficient and convenient, that we don't have massive theft of things going out the door because no one's watching, and that we don't have to have 2 cash registers because that's an incredible amount of labor, and you're giving up a lot of very valuable retail floor space that could be making you money if you have to have 2 sets of registers. So I am very excited to report that we think we found a solution to handle the receiving. I'm super excited about it, and we'll be sharing more once we have some floor plans that we feel like are ready to share with the board. And then I'm also happy to say that I believe we found an answer for the customer ingress and egress that will allow us to have a single set of checkouts, which will give us great lines of sight to both doors, make it easy for people to come in from the street if they're walking, or to come in from the parking lot on the backside. So we kind of have taken the fact that this is a triangle, it's not the usual shape that we want, off the table as a barrier for Chicago market potentially being successful at this store. I know the board members have also asked about some things that we're going to need to have from CTA or the city, and we will be getting back to you on our recommendations about those things in the next week or so. All right, back to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Kay. So I'm going to dive back in just for a minute into this urban food co-op piece. And I don't mean to belabor it, but I think it's a very important point to understanding your co-op. Again, we try very hard to avoid, we tell co-ops, do not try and be a special snowflake. But guess what? You win the prize. Your co-op kind of is a special snowflake. And we figured that out by doing a bunch of research. Because again, food co-ops the vast majority of food co-ops are in communities of a population between 20,000 and 200,000, and often college towns or suburban areas. So that doesn't mean that's where all food co-ops are. There's some in rural areas and there's some in dense urban areas, but the majority nationally are in these other types of markets, very different from yours. So what we know is, so we said, is it really a different game to run a food co-op in a high population, high density community? And actually it is, it's quite different. We found all the stores, we found comparison data from stores that are in markets with a very similar population density, and their financial numbers and performance are very different, significantly different. And we do believe this is a factor that has not before been heavily considered in the feasibility work for Chicago market. And we didn't want to hang this on a hope. We went and talked to those co-ops. We were able to get financial data for a couple of them, and we were able to talk directly to general managers who have run these stores. And what we know from looking at the successful ones in these markets is that it is significantly different. And when I say high density urban areas, I'm talking New York, San Diego, Seattle. I am not talking Indianapolis or St. Louis. I would still say they're not special snowflakes. They're not, or the density is not high enough that it really changes the game. You guys are in a community that does do that. So we know lots of things about these, and I could geek on this for a while. Again, I'm a general manager by trade in the past, but labor costs are higher, and you guys knew that was going to happen. Chicago's base wage is higher. Attracting the talent you're going to need is going to cost more, and we knew that. But what we also didn't know is that margins are always significantly higher as well, due to product mix. And yet, all of these stores actually have a very decent reputation for affordability. And we can go a lot more in depth on that in the future, but they come at it from a different model. They come at it with a really high quality. We want to have, these are world-class cities. We want to have high quality food. We want to really have unique, interesting options, lots of local. We want to mix that though and layer that with really affordable options, because everybody, no matter what their paycheck is, wants an excellent food experience. It's the one thing we all universally have to spend money on. Who here has not spent money on food as entertainment and gotten pleasure out of doing their grocery shopping at a fancy grocery store, and make it accessible yet also top grade? And it's a different product mix, honestly. So one other thing I'm going to stress is cultural fit is key. If we attempt to design a store that would do gangbusters in Champaign-Urbana, where my home co-op is, it would probably not do very well in Chicago, or might even fail. It's a very different cultural market. Our concerns, our price sensitivity, our product mix desires, our other options for shopping are extremely different. So remember, again, the standard model for developing a food co-op is based upon communities a lot more like Champaign-Urbana than yours, which is why we're focusing really intensely on the handful of stores that have a comparable market that are successful in this country already to what Chicago market has. So comparing Chicago market to those, I just want to stress again, we can't compare you apples to apples to co-ops that are in these communities. There is actually a point of urban density where the game changes a great deal, and you are definitely in that category. So that is informing our work very deeply right now.
Great, thanks, Jacqueline. I'm going to chat just a little bit about the programmatic directions. As we've already kind of hinted, we're kind of looking at two different paths that we're exploring. And we're in that green zone of throwing out ideas, checking it against the floor plan, running the numbers, you know, talking with our whole team, getting everybody's expert input with all the different operational expertise that they bring. I know you asked for the board members who submitted questions in advance, you asked a lot of questions about the types of changes we're considering relating to, you know, what about this department? Is this service going to be there? Is this type of programming? So please remember, we're early days yet. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to set any expectations or make any promises we can't fulfill. But I can tell you that both of the options that we're looking at include things that I know are important to you and in some ways even form the identity of Chicago Market up to this point, and will also need to be a strong part of continuing to build your identity moving forward. And that is local food being featured. This was one area that really surprised me as we shopped the competitors. Nobody's doing a great job of local. There's so much pride. There's so many great vendors and producers and value added people and great products being made in the city. So doing, you know, hyper local Chicagoland products, as well as just local and regional food, is something that is a space that you guys could really own. So we think that's going to be a real key differentiator and going to be important to do extremely well. And we think that does include a selection of local meats. Both of our programs, because you're in such a walkable space, you got the train station next door and on top of you, you got to have an incredibly robust deli, grab and go selection, and a prepared foods program. That's becoming more and more important for every grocery store generally in the industry, but because of where you're located and the population you're serving and the way people are moving through and through your neighborhood, that's going to be an absolute key for this store. And then the price accessibility that Jacqueline just kind of mentioned. We need the store to serve everybody in the community. Everybody wants to shop at a clean, beautiful, lovely grocery store. So you can do that while also, you know, carefully curating and crafting your product mix to ensure that whatever you're shopping for, you know what, there's an affordable option for the person who needs that. And there's some other options for people who might be able to spend a little more or are looking for that, you know, special thing this time around in their grocery shopping. So that's about all I can say on our programmatic directions right now. Like I said, we are kind of still, you know, running through our cycle of vetting ideas, testing it against the model, checking the numbers, and we will get that back to you in the final report with a single recommendation that we believe is absolutely the most efficient and most effective way to make Chicago Market a successful grocery store in your community.
I have to be a little badly behaved. We are trying to say, there's some things we are not saying. We're doing a lot of analysis work there. And I want to be clear, like, we spend time and doing analysis on if you wanted to go get baked goods quickly for a meeting, where in this community would that happen? Where's the nearest good cup of coffee? Where's the nearest well-curated selection of beer and wine? We went very in depth. So that sounds super broad and vague. It will not be in the end, but those are the pieces that we can tell you now without making false promises because they have not all been tested yet. But we have some definite clear visions and ideas on what is missing in your market where you could really make an impression. All right, so this is me kind of cheating. The board actually asked, do you see some areas you know, of concern, of challenge that the future GM is going to need to be aware of? And the answer to that's yes. Every food co-op that has ever existed has some challenges, unique challenges and problems that the GM's gonna need to keep a close eye on, monitor, and address. And absolutely, as we get further down the programmatic road, we can list some of those out for you, and we're happy to do that. So I'm not answering that question because we can't yet. There's a lot yet to be figured out. I mean, I could point to some things, but we'll do a much better job putting that list together with our full team toward the end as we're building our report. But I do want to point out something we've really noticed as we're building this. Every startup food co-op needs a good GM. Don't get me wrong. But startup food co-ops have opened all over the country, and there are multiple that have opened with a GM who ended up being a poor fit or couldn't bring all the talent needed, and the board was able to pivot and you know, the person either left or to bring in new talent and find the right fit. And they were to take some time with that and to stumble a bit. Not that it didn't affect them financially, not that it wasn't hard, but and to bring in people maybe who were not from a co-op background, were trying something very new, maybe had a management background but not a food management background. In this case, a lot of Chicago markets' success is going to hinge on creating an excellent store. One thing Chicago is not is a forgiving market for a bad presentation. This store is going to have to be really well run from the start. Not only does it be really well run, you're opening at 2 to 3 times the volume that most food co-ops usually open at, new startups. So this person's going to have to be really an expert. And the dense urban market experience, we can't stress enough, is different. And they're going to have to know those differences. You could take a GM who was excellent at what they did in a college town, like myself, and put them in this market. And if they hadn't had any experience at this market, hadn't thought it through, didn't understand its differences, they could still fail because it's just so different. I'm not saying you have to have someone who has absolutely run a food co-op in New York, but you have to have someone who understands the difference between an urban market and how to address it. And ideally, has some experience with an urban market, even if it's just living in one and experiencing that food culture and understanding some of its differences. Local food is going to be so key to what you guys do. And there are so many potential vendors and partnerships in Chicago, in Chicagoland, greater Chicagoland. You're not, when you walk into a co-op again in a community like Champaign-Urbana, the list of local vendors we could possibly have relationships with is so long, and then the GM kind of whittles that down, figures out who wants to work with them. It's going to be a much broader, much more challenging project, and ultimately a much more rewarding one with a much more amazing result. But you're going to have someone who can bring those amazing results, who knows how to get in there and build unique relationships with individual vendors, seek out those vendors, find them, bring unique tastes into your store that other stores maybe haven't really put on the map yet. It's going to be someone who can really do that, who can seek out these product relationships and build them, not just show up and place a major distributor order and work with a couple farmers. They're going to need to have marketing savvy. I think you guys know this, but you can't walk into Chicago and have a bad marketing plan. And marketing what is a small business in Chicago is going to take a lot of savvy on the budget you're going to have. So we can't have a GM who comes in who thinks, yeah, I'll just hire a marketing coordinator. They're going to have to understand the importance of marketing and how they would tailor that and how they get the expertise to tailor that in Chicago. They're going to need to actually have the ability also to identify and recruit top talent. Your store is going to need excellent high-level talent. It's not just anybody who's kind of worked at a grocery store before. Again, there's some markets where that's forgiving, won't be so much here. So ideally, co-op experience, because not only they're going to have to be good at all these things, creating this identity, creating the physical manifestation of this vision and this identity you guys have around local, being high volume, being really well marketed. They're going to have to know how to communicate like a co-op to its owners, to its board, so the need levels are high. And what I would say here is Chicago is a world-class city with a world-class food scene. You need to recruit like it. And I know you know that recruiting your GM is going to be important, but I think we should talk at some point in more depth about you're going to need to go hard and look for the top talent you can get and be as capable, be prepared to pay for it as possible that person is going to be key. So that was us actually kind of cheating and not answering a question, but telling you this is really emerging as a key issue.
Yeah. I will also say this is a passion issue for Jacqueline and I. Just thinking about, making sure the right GM is in place is such a critical part of GM success. So we're actually working on a book about all this. So passion project for both of us.
Well, and Kay and Jacqueline, thanks. No pressure as the GM chair for the search committee. I appreciate this slide.
Well, as I said, I'm willing, no extra fee. I'm willing to hang out with you and help. So we'll see.
I will be calling on you. Trust me.
Yay. All right. So this is you guys. We all know a co-op is its owners, and this is only going to happen. I know you're already doing some work and laying the groundwork for the financing piece of this. Co-op world has changed a bit, and we're looking more and more to our owners to fund more and more of the project. But, you know, we just want to say that we're super excited about what we're seeing so far. We're not making any promises. We kind of won't know the end till we get to the end. But I think it's an exciting time to be re-engaging owners and, you know, looking forward to what's ahead for you guys as Chicago market. Something to add, Jacqueline?
I'll try and keep it short. Okay, here's my pep talk. When your board decided to do this, this relook at this site and feasibility, as your board decided this, I thought it was a good idea. And I had no idea at the time I'd be on the team, but I thought it was worth one more look. I thought it was a responsible move. Since I've gotten involved, since we've been able to look at all your materials, study your market up close, study your building up close, get to know the food culture surrounding your store. We even interviewed some of your owners and talked to them from all these different angles. And the market study, I have to say, this is an excellent leadership decision on your board's part. And I get to say that because I'm actually here as a volunteer. I'm the member of the team that's not being paid. So I can honestly say, I want to say this was an excellent leadership decision. Your instincts were right on. There's so much indicating that this is the right site and that there's got to be a way to make it work. We are the whole team. We have to say cautiously, but we are cautiously optimistic and far more optimistic than we expected to be at week 4 about the ability to deliver a plan that could work. So I just want to say that. But that said, even if we deliver a Cadillac of a plan and it's perfect in every way and it can totally work, this isn't going to happen if this city doesn't decide to build it. And this isn't aimed at the board. I'm sharing this with the owners. You know, this is a national movement to start these food co-ops and make these changes in our food movements through a cooperative co-ownership. And there are co-ops all around the country in communities of 25,000 people that have so far raised quadruple what you guys have raised in owner loans. There are communities of 40,000 that have as many owners as you and are growing fast. Chicago, can it raise the money it needs to raise? Can it get the ownership going the right direction? Can it really get a world-class vision together that fits its city, that excites everyone? Absolutely, without a doubt. But you're going to have to make the decision to make that happen. It's going to take your creativity. It's going to take your time. It's going to take your money. It's going to take your talent, which, you know, Chicago has oodles of, to get together and build this thing. No one else is doing it. It's a weird experience to feel like, you know, usually you hear something's coming and then you just wait for updates. But this is yours and you're going to have to really grasp it and decide to do it. And I hope we can deliver that feasibility, and I hope you decide to, because really grasp it and get this thing. We know you can do it because communities, you know, pittance of your size have. So can you do it? Absolutely. You can do this. But you have an opportunity. The lack of local in Chicago is interesting. You may feel you have a really robust local program, but local food options, but actually compared to a lot of other cities of your size, the availability of local is kind of minimal. And that is leaving so much on the table about what Chicago could be as a food culture. There are farmers, producers, creative food innovators who are not being able to work up to their potential, not being able to do all they could do, that could have their work transformed by Chicago market. You guys really, as one little co-op, have an opportunity to take, I'm not being silly here, I mean, take Chicago's entire food scene to a new level and to a new level of equity. And so I really hope you guys are gonna really grasp that and know that we may come back with a great plan, but this is on your shoulders.
Great, thank you for that, Jacqueline. I second everything she said. We want to be conscious of your time. I know there's a whole agenda behind us. It looks like we do have just a few minutes if we want to take any other questions from the board. Like I said, we did try to answer as many of your pre-questions as we could in the presentation. And there may be some that we need to take offline into an executive session, and we're kind of working with Grant to arrange that if it's needed. And we will be getting back to you in a couple days on some of the other outstanding questions. But does the board have anything right now that they'd like to ask or clarify? I think we have just a couple of minutes.
Kay, I have one quick question. This is Anthony. And this is an easy one, I think. I'm not going to ask you what we might need to ask for from CTA, because I don't expect you to know that yet, and I know you're working on it. The only reason I ask this is because I'm literally, as we sit here, writing the red line response to CTA of their latest proposal. Mm-hmm. And what I'm asking is, are we going to have significant asks of CTA, or are we going to have tweaks around the edges? I don't even know what they are. I just am curious of whether the team has identified things that they really want to ask for.
At this point, I guess I'd say I'd probably come to the table with some significant asks. Some of it depends on your negotiating strategy as well, and we can talk more about that, but just be mentally preparing for the former, I would say.
Yeah, perfect. That makes sense. And we can have a conversation about that in another forum. I just wanted to check.
Perfect. Other questions?
This is Dana. I had one for you, and it was related to that more serious comment around the GM slide. I don't know that anything that you had mentioned down there was necessarily surprising to me with a lot of the research that I've been doing or have thought about over the years as we've considered what we would need a GM to be doing. One of the thoughts, though, that I'm also trying to prepare, because if we get an answer back that there is a feasible way forward, we are going to hit the ground, not just running, but like at 80,000 miles per hour. And so one of the things that I'm trying to kind of like wrap my head around is when you look at that slide of what our future GM would need to be doing or have a skill set around, I'm trying to think, is there a head start that we can get? Are there committees we can start forming to do some of the research, to do some of the legwork? For example, we have had previously a grocery logistics and procurement committee that has been on pause because there's no need for that committee right now. One of the things they did was create our purchasing values. They also had started a bit of a connection to local vendors in the area. If we have volunteers that are able to do some work like that, that's just an example that popped into my head. Is that something we should, as a board and from an organizational perspective, start preparing for?
My answer is yes. And I think your committee can do some things. I think right now, as I said, your local food scene is more complex. And there are more vendors, and it isn't about reaching out to those vendors necessarily. If you could even start with, and I can help you identify the areas, but start identifying all the options and within your definition of local, within your definition of regional, and get them into categories of possibility. And start, if they can start just getting all that contact information, what do they make? Do they already wholesale? Do they not? You know, there's some key questions that aren't going to be too hard for them to go out and find the answers for and organize, that will give the GM, if your GM comes from without the community. There's a lot of talent in Chicago, but that said, I think there's a high probability your GM will come from outside the community, simply because, again, you're going to be looking for somebody very special. They might be coming from a different major city. And unless they've already been deeply engaged in your food scene, that list will do wonders for getting them a head start to move forward.
Yeah.
So I can see us doing that, but I'm going to help Dana. I think she was asking, should her GM team be working now? She was using the other one as an example of background work.
Right. Well, definitely.
Right?
I mean, I think there are more things on that list, Grant, than just what a GM search would be doing and finding the GM. I think there's legwork that would help the GM once place. So that's why I'm looking.
Sure.
I'm looking for some recommendations from you as a consulting group on what are those legwork things that we can start preparing. And this would be like broader than even that GM list, right? I'm sure you guys are already kind of like got your gears, moving on some of those ideas and thoughts. I want to pivot to a slightly different question, which is, I have 3 pages of questions. But my first question had to do with, or my next question has to do with the labor cost. And I know you had talked about that being an issue, but then when I hear you talking about some of the things that are missing in our market that we could provide that would align with our values, the fresh local, the meat options that are not local, because we don't have a lot of that at all in Chicago. Those are all things that we had from the get-go, from Greg's original vision of Chicago market, were things that we had identified. My thought around a lot of that is, to me, my understanding is those are also very high labor intensive departments. So how do we balance those out? Or is there, are you evaluating how much and how far to go in order to like peel back on labor costs? I'm trying to understand your thought process around that.
So there's a lot of ways to deliver those things. So you had I think there was a very particular vision of how to deliver those things, and those were costly. There are a lot of ways to deliver those things and not have them be as costly. So are we promising you an on-site butcher of local meats who makes cuts on site? No. Are we saying that, but are there like 2 or 3 other ways to address that and have an amazing local selection, but doesn't mean having a butcher on staff? Yes. And there are a lot of places like that where I think some of the problems were there was an assumption of how to deliver it that was expensive. Not that there aren't lots of stores delivering those things at much lower labor. You know, same thing with the deli. Again, we're not saying we're going to go this direction, but you have an immense amount of vendors doing amazing food. And there's a really good opportunity to have maybe 20, 30, 40% of what you're offering in the deli be stuff that is actually from other vendors that your staff is packaging and putting out. Still local flavors, still excellent stuff. Still totally your values, promoting those businesses, giving them more opportunities, more business, promoting a Chicago brand, but not increasing your labor dollar angles. So there's lots of ways to deliver these things that actually don't have to be high labor. And I think there were some high labor assumptions made about how you wanted to deliver it.
That makes sense. And so that kind of leads me to my last question that I'll ask, because I want to make sure if there's other board members that they get to ask questions too. But we're the special snowflake. I appreciate that. But being a special snowflake also means, how do you ensure that you've got clarity around that we're hitting the mark when there's nothing else to compare us to? Like, how do you make assumptions when there's no comps? You know, I'm curious around what your thoughts are related to that.
Well, I think that's why, you know, we've gone back even into your Performa and went back to your Performa fighters and said, okay, we want to pull some different comps for this. You know, we want to find, compare it to what Central Co-op's doing in Seattle. Let's compare it to Flatbush in New York City. Let's make sure we're comparing apples to apples with what this actually, what your community is and what your store is. So we've gone back kind of to the drawing board, making sure that we're comparing it to those things. There are a few out there. You know, you are a special, certainly in Chicago, and this is going to be a very different type of store than what we typically see opening in the Midwest in smaller college towns and, you know, smaller markets and stuff like that. So it's not that there's no comps out there to compare to whatsoever. It's just that there's very few, and we need to be very strategic and make sure we're looking at the right ones and digging down into understanding what we're seeing in those unusual numbers and what's behind it all.
You guys probably have about 5 direct comps nationally. So what we're doing is we're looking at those comps, and we're still pulling the national data for co-ops in your size range. And so we're going to be balancing both of those sets of comps and making these decisions. We're not just going to go, well, you're just going to be exactly like Chicago, like Central Market, you know, in Seattle. We're going to be looking at what those comps are doing and where those differences line up and we've already been doing a lot of this work and are consistent. And we're also looking at what just your peers on a national level who are opening stores in this size range, what they're doing. And we're balancing between that. But you're right. You're pointing to a real risk that the comp numbers are not deep. And so we are going to have to, we don't want to be overly optimistic, but at the same time, if we shoot for the comps of stores in wildly different markets that are performing very differently than the ones that comp close to you, that's a big risk too.
Well, and it almost sounds like you even delved down into comping just one thing that another co-op does that would be similar to what we might be doing rather than the whole picture of that co-op. So it sounds like there's some, you know, dividing down to like nitty gritties or department level comparisons.
Right. At some point, we're going to be focusing more on Central's deli, but more on Flatbush's grocery program because of these parallels. So we are dividing up to that level.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry, board. You know, I always have all the questions.
Well, you're not. They're well aligned with the rest of us, I'm sure. So thanks, Dana. Any other board members have questions?
I don't have so much of a question as I just wanted to say that report is incredibly validating after all of our efforts of trying to, what now we realize was fitting a square into a circle. It's so validating to hear that we are indeed a special snowflake, and it's going to be difficult to pave the way in our specialness, but thank you for validating all of our sneaking suspicions.
And the need, the fact that
And
there's a need for us.
we didn't come in expecting to validate you. Our first version was actually to strip out all the specialness and see if we could make it, shove it into that triangle and make it work. And it wasn't working. And that's when we realized we had to do some deeper research. So your guys' instincts were far more on than ours were in the beginning.
Awesome. Anyone else with questions? No?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and share. We look forward to the next couple of weeks of work. We'll be keeping you posted as we move through the rest of our steps and coming back with some more questions. I do want to thank this board. You know, the team we've been working with have been highly responsive, giving us everything we need. You know, we've been absolutely great to work with. So we're having a lot of fun. We're enjoying the challenge of this project, and we're excited to, you know, deliver hopefully some good news to you at the end.
I'm really impressed with the professionalism of the board. Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, I think we're likewise impressed with where you're taking this and the professionalism of your research. So thank you